So Amy, great. So now we're recording. So we'll officially start 4:02. So hi everybody. Thank you for joining us at the end of the day. And I know it's at the end of, for those of you on the East Coast, I know it's 7 o'clock in the evening. So thank you for making the time. I'm Karen Cow. I'm the CEO of 10 Strands. 10 Strands is a California-based nonprofit focused on advancing student environmental literacy. We do that through focusing on advocacy, through capacity building projects with county offices of ed and school districts, and through building the field, strengthening the field, network building, that kind of thing. This project is one of our projects, I'm happy to say, and I'd like to spend as much time in Q&A, so we're just going to do a little setup, move through a few slides fairly quickly, and then we'll get to Q&A, okay? I'll tell you how we're going to handle the Q&A in a minute as well. And then my colleague Celeste is advancing the slide. So Celeste, if you could move to the next slide. And my colleague Amy will be dropping links in as we're talking, and also looking at the Jamboard, which is what we're going to use for Q&A. So here's our agenda. I won't read that for you because I'll let you read that for yourselves, but we'll go through this agenda in the next 20 minutes or so. And then we would like to capture your questions on the Jamboard. There's 4 pages on the Jamboard, 4 separate pages on the Jamboard, each with a theme. And so you can take a look at those themes and you could post your questions in the right place. And as I'm talking, Amy will be looking at your questions and gathering them together, and we'll use them to kick off the Q&A. But if you've never looked at a Jamboard in your life and you would rather just listen to me, don't worry about the Jamboard, and then we can just have some time together for Q&A more informally. And also I'd be happy to, after we get to the hour, we'll switch off the recording. I'd be happy to stay on a little bit with people as well if you like. Okay, next slide, please. So if you could introduce yourselves, that would be wonderful. If you could just take a second and just, some of you have already been doing it, you're used to Zoom by now, but if you could put your name and your organization and your role in that organization in the chat, I'd appreciate it. And while you're doing that, I'm hoping that Nancy McGee from San Mateo County Office of Ed is on. Are you on, Nancy?
I am here.
Hi, good.
Hi.
Good, thank you. Nancy, so 10 Strands, I'll explain a little bit more about this relationship in a minute, but 10 Strands is working with San Mateo County Office of Ed in this project, and their superintendent is here right now. And so I'd like to hand it over to Nancy to introduce herself and talk a little bit about the importance of this project to them. So Nancy, over to you.
Great, thank you, Karen. Wow, what a great turnout. Lots and lots of interested people from all across the place. So really thrilled to have you be joining this session today. My name's Nancy McGee. I'm the county superintendent in San Mateo County, and just between San Francisco and Santa Clara counties, and on the coast of Northern California. And we are really honored at the county office to be part of this great project with 10 Strands. You may know that San Mateo County Office of Education is powered by the amazing Andrew Ugoyan, who is a national and state leader in environmental education and literacy. So I just hang on to Andra, and she takes us all over the place, and I hold on for dear life. But we're doing such exciting work here, doing all kinds of professional development and building networks of educators, school and district leaders, and students around the importance of environmental education. And this project was just something we couldn't stay away from. It's so exciting that we'll be creating engaging, meaningful, compelling units around environmental education and climate justice for every student in California. And because it will be Creative Commons license, it would be accessible pretty much all over the world. So what an amazing, powerful thing you have in front of you to be part of. So I want to thank you for bringing your heart, passion, lens, and intelligence to this meeting today. I hope you get your questions answered, and just know that there's a lot of really great people, including Karen Cow at the head of 10 Strands, navigating this really powerful, important project that we're so thrilled to be part of. So back to you, Karen, and thanks everybody for being here.
Thank you, Nancy. And I'm a little jealous of your background. I'm going to have to up my game on the background front. So, thank you. All right. So next slide, please. So just a little bit of background on this. I'm just, hang on 1 second. There we go. I want to see all of your faces. So just a little background on where this came from. You know, I mean, it's a good idea in and of itself without needing to have come from anywhere. But there is some background precedence for this in California. So almost 20 years ago in California, 2003, this state supported an initiative that articulated environmental principles and concepts to be connected to our state standards and frameworks. And at the same time, it invested in a model curriculum called the EEI curriculum. And that was an amazing body of work. And we spent 10 Strands, our organization has spent time working with the state agency that was responsible for that and getting those materials into classrooms. What that original body of work did not include was a focus on climate change and environmental justice. It could have, but it didn't at the time. So fast forward a bit, in 2018, 10 Strands did some advocacy, one of our pillars, as I said at the beginning, and we were able to add those two topics, climate change and environmental justice, into our ed code. We also did some other things at the same time. For example, we ratified these environmental principles and concepts in our ed code, and we added some core ideas from California's blueprint for environmental literacy into ed code too. But most meaningfully, it was the addition of these two subjects, climate change and environmental justice. With that in place, we were interrupted a little bit because of the pandemic, but we came back to it because it was always our intention to get those two topics included and focused on, and then come back and ask for support to create model curriculum units or curricular resources focused on these two topics. And we were able to secure that last year through a trailer bill, AB 130, section 151, if you want to look it up. But here's the little paragraph where it articulates how the money flows from the state to this relationship with San Mateo County Office of Ed. And then we will work in partnership with them to get that done, to get the whole body of work done. Next slide, please. So just want to make sure that everybody has access to everything that we've published so far. I think you do because you're here, but Amy's going to put in some links for you. The first is to the 10 Strands website that we just put up last week, where we articulate the call for these letters of interest. The second is to the letter of interest itself. The third is to a project synopsis that we worked on. I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a minute. 10 Strands team and others worked on that. And then we just, in order to support this work fully at 10 Strands, we just announced a new position, an open position for a director of curriculum. And that's separate from us seeking writers to work on the project. But if you know anybody who might be a strong candidate for that job, I would really appreciate referrals. So just making sure you have all of that. Next slide, please. All right, so here's a little bit of a view of how we're thinking about the different parts of this project. I'll just sit with 10 Strands in the middle because that's how we've positioned ourselves. And we are working, as I said, in partnership with the County Office of Ed, and then also in connection with the Department of Ed. But in that middle block, in terms of what we will take on and be responsible for, is we're project lead. So project management, coordination, partnerships, fundraising. We intended to continue to fundraise. Publishing process management, talk about that maybe through Q&A. Developer consortium management, this is, you know, people like you, and external evaluation, right? So this is the piece of it that we'll take on. And then to the left of us, or to the left of my screen anyway, there will be an advisory board that we're in the process of building. So for example, Superintendent Nancy McGee would be on that advisory board, somebody from the Department of Ed, somebody from the State Board of Ed, probably the EPA, probably Department of Natural Resources, but just people that we would want to stay connected to as we go through the process, and to get advice and input. We're also in the process of building a steering committee that will help us continue to articulate the vision, the direction, and then feedback from the field, in the sense that they are subject matter experts that we, whose opinions we trust and depend on. And the work that we've done so far was done in collaboration with this steering committee, right? We've just confirmed some participation, which I'll share in a minute, and we need to add to it a little bit too. And then there's obviously the funding flow from the Department of Ed to San Mateo, and then, you know, to us, in order to get into relationship with you. And then on the developer consortium side, I'm labeling it that because we think there'll be multiple players. And so as a group, we're just calling you a consortium. But on that side, it would be unit development, field testing of those units, professional learning, building out the professional learning modules that would go with the units. So not necessarily doing professional learning, but the modules themselves, and the data collection and analysis related to field testing. Okay, so that's how we're seeing at the high level, like, you know, squinting at the project at the high level, that's how we're seeing the different roles play out. Next slide, please. Okay, so this team is in the process of being built out, but currently this is who's working on it with us. I'm first on the list there, under 10 Strands, and then Amy Frame, who's our Director of Strategic Partnerships, who's also dropping URLs into chat for you. And then the to be hired Director of Curriculum that I just mentioned a few minutes ago. And then Mark St. John, he's not an employee of 10 Strands, but he's a trusted advisor. And so he's working with the 10 Strands team. He's the founder and president of Inverness Research, and he's also on the call. And then the steering committee. So when we created the project synopsis that you've been looking at, we got input from actually more people than that's on this list, but this is the group that is going to start to work with us to build out a steering committee. And if you're in California and used to doing work in California, you probably recognize a lot of these names. Okay, I won't read them out, but that's the beginning of our steering committee. We have some gaps which we'll fill, but we'll fill the gaps based on talking to each other about who, you know, I don't want 10 Strands necessarily to only be the only entity picking people to sit on teams. All right, next slide, please.
You know, I'm gonna get your PJs now, okay?
Oh, you could go on mute. That would be wonderful. Thank you. Can we control mute? Okay, great. All right. So, who are we looking for? This is in the LOI, and so there's nothing on this slide that's not in the LOI. But I wanted to bring it up in the context of this meeting to tell you why it was we articulated our ideas in this way. Really what we're trying to do with this project is, I mean, my background's publishing, and I know a lot of people in the publishing sector, and I know a lot of entities that are highly qualified to do this work. And that's great. And I love you, and I love working with you. And I want to create opportunities for other people to come to the table too. So this is a sort of, you know, if you're a one-stop shop and you can provide everything to the project and you want to apply, that is fantastic. If you don't have that size capacity, but you think you have a valuable contribution to make for a piece of it that maybe is unique and interesting, we'd like to hear from you too. Okay, so these are different arrangements that we might get into depending on who submits interest. Okay, I'm not going to read it because it's in your LOI, but I wanted to explain to you why we're thinking about it this way. It's the equity slide for the development of the units. Okay, next slide, please. This is also a repeat of what's in your packet, and I'm sure you would expect to see many of these things connected to a project like this. Unique for California, though, is our environmental principles and concepts, and so I just wanted to underscore that for people. And you know, our model curriculum that I mentioned has already demonstrated how you would integrate environmental principles and concepts into standards-based instruction. So we have some guidance for that. But I do want to underscore that for people from other places, that that's important to us. And the other thing that's important to us are California contexts. So we deliberately coupled this climate change education piece with environmental justice, because we want to make sure that as we proceed with this work, that we're thinking about California children in California places exploring environmental justice and climate related issues in their communities. So this is, California's a big state, you know, 5 times bigger than the country I grew up in. But from the point of view of this work that we're doing, we want it to be expressed as a very local experience, so that it is as relevant as possible to the population of students that we work with in California schools and in the public school system. So I just wanted to make sure that when I had you here on the call, that that we underscored some of those pieces that are important to us. Next slide, please. A little bit about the timeline. It's a little tighter than we were hoping for, to tell you the truth. But we did have to wait for the state to be able to process the money. So we did have to wait a little longer than we thought, but here we are. And we still think we can get it done. I've talked to people who have been working on resources most recently, OER resources most recently, and they've shared with me that they think this timeline's doable. So we're talking about a kickoff in the summer of 22, so this upcoming summer. We've tentatively scheduled this week of July 25th through July 29th to bring people together. We're hoping that that will be in person. If it's not possible to do it on those dates, obviously, based on who we end up working with, we will adjust that. But we thought we better get something on the calendar because it's hard, right? So we're thinking of a kickoff summer of 2022, and then the writing and piloting in the school year, the drafting anyway, and the piloting 22-23. And then next summer, recruitment for teacher field testing, and then in the fall, the field testing of the draft units, and then revision, and then completion. So that's the current projected timeline. And as we said in the LOI or in the synopsis, you know, we're talking about units or resources that will cover approximately, we think, about 3 weeks of instruction. Okay, so 13 3-week chunks. Okay, next slide, please. Just a little bit about where we are in process. the bold bit is where we're at today on this meeting. And then we'll have another meeting, another webinar. Like I said, we'll post this so people can look at it, and we'll have another webinar closer to the deadline, and in case people have other questions, and we won't cover the same content, it'll be different content. And then the initial letters of interest are due 4/8, so April 8. And then we'll take a month to review everything, 10 Strands and the steering committee, or some members of the steering committee and some members of the advisory board. And then we'll get back to people who we think are sort of best fit based on the ideas that you articulate. And then we'll finalize, and we'll get cracking end of June, into July. Okay, next, please. All right, letters of interest. We want to go broad initially. And so we didn't write a heavy RFP because it's all to write and it's all to read. So we thought that what we would do is, and sometimes I realize it's harder to write 5 pages than it is to write 50 pages because you have to really like concentrate your thinking. But again, we're trying to sort of focus on equity, and we're trying to have a process whereby you apply in a way where the barrier for entry is lowered, and what we get from you is accessible, so we can move through the materials and get back to you to let you know if everything feels like a good fit. Okay, so nothing new on this slide from the LOI, but I just wanted to emphasize that's why we're taking this LOI approach and not a heavy RFP approach. Next slide. That's just a continuation of what's in your documents. Next slide. Just a little bit more about what we're thinking for this summer kickoff, just to help you think it through. So obviously we'd convene everybody that I've just been talking about. We're hoping that week in July. If it's not possible, we'll figure out something else. We're hoping in person in Northern California in all likelihood, just because of where our team is mostly clustered. Obviously travel and everything would be reimbursed. And then the goal at that meeting would be to develop the blueprint for the curricular resources that will guide the writing process, but also to connect and collaborate as a team. And it'll be fun. We'll be in a beautiful place somewhere doing good work together. Okay, next slide, please. All right, that's all I had to cover. Got through it in about 20 minutes. And now we'll get into Q&A, and Amy's been, I hope, able to find the time to sort of sort through what people have been asking and kick it off. So Amy, if you're ready to do that, that would be wonderful. And then also, you know, if you have other questions, we can attend to it in some other way through chat, or you can just come off mute and ask. Okay, Amy?
Hi, yeah, we have just a couple, but I definitely encourage people to keep adding on to that. Not necessarily going to go in order. A couple about the timeline and schedule. So one is, would virtual be an option for the summer for those that can't make it to California due to another engagement at the same time?
I think what I'd rather do is find a time where we could all meet. You know, I think for a project where we're going to be working together so closely for a couple of years, as long as it's safe from a COVID perspective, and we would arrange a safe setting, you know, it would be an indoor-outdoor experience, a mostly outdoor experience. I think I'd like to try and get everybody together. I just think it's the right kind of thing to gel the chemistry around a project like this. So if you were absolutely stuck and couldn't come, I think I would rather look for another date.
Great. And then the next question is, what guidelines does 10 Strands have for the curriculum? Is there an expectation that the curricula for each grade level will follow some kind of template or format?
We've gone back and forth in this, but I'll just tell you this. What's written in the synopsis document is to a large degree, the entirety of what we've been thinking about the project so far, right? There's no other document in the background. And and we just decided to share it with you. I mean, we made a few edits, right? For stuff that there would be no reason for you to read. So that's why it says short. When you look at the link, it says short. But all our thinking is in that document right now. And I mean, I think we will arrive at a place where when we together decide on the approach that we're going to take, where there'll be a structured approach to unit design, because we want to build out an authoring system and a content management system so that we can output in different formats, including the state's requirement for an adaptation of the materials that relate to student accessibility. So yeah, there will be eventually a structured approach, but in this moment, we don't need to know, we don't feel that we need to know what exactly that is. Yeah.
Great. We're getting quite a few questions just about the vision for the curriculum, Karen.
Mm-hmm.
So another one is, what is the future use of this curriculum that we'll write? And a related question to that is, will the curriculum be adopted by school districts, counties, et cetera?
Hopefully, the curriculum will be adopted by counties who do professional development, by districts who do professional development, by teachers who are attracted to them. And because we're going to release them as an open education resource, we will encourage derivatives, we'll encourage localization, we'll encourage innovation around them. And we would like to build a platform where all of that can take place and be showcased as well. So, we'll have the state set, let's say, that some of us will create together. And then it would be really amazing if we could, have a coastal set and an inland set and a, northern set and a desert set that emerge out of teachers working with the materials together or in relationship with professional learning providers. What was the first question? I asked the second bit first, Amy. What was the first bit of that question?
What is the future use in general?
Right. Widespread, hopefully. I mean, they're supplemental in the sense that we're not creating 180 days of instructional materials, but we hope compelling enough because of the degree to which they're very specific to California for any teacher in any grade level across multiple subjects that might want to touch them. Yeah.
Okay, great. And if you're adding questions, if possible, if you could use the Jamboard, that would be very helpful. But I will get to the ones in chat as well.
Mm-hmm.
A few more questions about just sort of what is being published. So how will the materials be branded, and will it be representative of all contributors to the curriculum?
They will be copyright San Mateo, and then San Mateo will release them with a, I nearly said Common Core, with a Creative Commons license, so that they can be most flexible for teacher and professional learning provider use. And anybody who contributes to them, while they won't carry the copyright, they won't hold the copyright, they'll be recognized in the front matter of all of the units across the entire body of work. So people will definitely get recognized. Yeah.
Great. And do you envision the curriculum as a digital first and ready to go to minimize the lift for teachers while making the materials customizable to honor local priorities?
Yes, whoever said that, yes, that's nice. Like that. I think we might have to revise the synopsis to include that sentence. Yes.
And a related question in a way, do you have a vision for how much the curricular materials would be allowed to lean on open source technological supports like modeling tools and data exploration tools?
I'm very excited by the idea of that. And, we have some good examples now of open education resource materials, instructional materials that have harvested content and from other sources and used tools like that from other providers. I'm tempted to sort of name some, but I won't on this call. But I've seen some very nice things that have been done with data exploration tools, data analysis tools that are open source. And I think that kind of thing would be very exciting. Common data sets, that kind of thing, pulling down common data sets. Yeah.
I just expanded the post-it too, and it says, or are you hoping to keep it more paper-based like OpenSciEd, at least as it started that way?
I think the main thing is, again, as it relates to equity, that we produce an asset that anybody can use in any setting. That was an attractive thing to me when I started to work with the EEI materials. You know, they were designed so that they didn't need expensive science kits and things like that. So our design principle will be, can this be used by anybody in any setting? And then extensions like that will be the use of data tools, data analysis tools, data exploration tools would be massively welcome. I mean, back in the day, we were the first publisher to produce a math textbook that required the use of a graphing calculator, right? And it worried us to death at the time because we were like, what if not everybody has a graphing calculator? So we just want to think through the choices we make with respect to equity.
If an organization already has curriculum developed that could be modified to use in this situation, that are already branded, but also Creative Commons OER, how would you approach those resources with copyright?
That's an interesting question. If they, I don't know. I mean, I understand the OER piece, but I would need to understand a little bit more about the copyright piece. Let's hold that one, and I'll get the answer to that one. Yeah.
Keeping on the strand of related questions, would you recommend integration with existing curricula like FOSS, Amplify, etc.?
I would love to see mappings between, like deliberate mappings between those amazing programs and this body of work. Another attractive feature to me from the EEI curriculum was it deliberately did that. You know, in the front matter of the teacher's edition, it said if you're using such and such, you can use this as a replacement if you want to explore this topic using the environment as a context for learning. And so I would love those deliberate mappings between whatever gets produced and materials like FOSS or Amplify or other things. Yeah.
To what extent do you think of the units as standalone as opposed to integrated with and expanding from existing social studies or science units?
Probably, relatively speaking, standalone, but I think like it relates to the last question. You know, I think where common ground could be explored, complementary connections made, you know, all to the good for teachers feeling like they're having a smooth experience.
Great. And are you looking primarily for project-based curriculum?
Maybe not primarily, although certainly, and it depends entirely what we mean by PBL, because there are different models for that. But certainly an experience, an inquiry, an experience that leads to students understanding local issues, leading to global understandings, with an opportunity for them to act within their local settings, whether that's a school setting or a campus setting or a community setting. So certainly experiences that lead to community-based action.
Great. Now there's a couple of questions about sort of the team that we're putting together.
Right.
So what kinds of member organizations and educators would be part of your dream team developer consortium?
So I was thrown because I was thinking, when you said team putting together, I was thinking about the 10 Strands team plus the steering committee. So you're saying like from within the developer consortium?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Everybody on this call, no. You know, this is a California project. We're interested in California context and we're interested in California issues, and so there definitely has to be a sensitivity to that. People who appreciate interdisciplinary connections, even if like the home for a unit is science or the home for a unit is history, social science, an appreciation of a demonstrated appreciation and sort of practical application connected to establishing interdisciplinary connections. And also people for whom in their previous work, they understand the value of community-based partners and the richness that by making explicit connections to them, we can take kids further faster in their thinking. Those are the kind of, that's the kind of, you know, mood I think it's important to, and mood and experience I think it's important to establish.
Great. I think a big question that I'm seeing a lot of pluses and this kind of same thing and put in another way is one person wrote, in the synopsis, it recommends collaborating between organizations. Could you speak more about this? And well, let's leave it at that for now.
Right. I think you saw that slide where I had the colored boxes and 10 strands sort of in the middle, and so functioning, I hope, as the sort of the glue, but also the grease to enable smooth conversations, smooth interactions to take place, for example, between things that the steering committee's noticing as they help us sort of calibrate and stay centered, and things that are sort of emerging out of the people that we're working with to write the materials. And so it's sort of a core and important piece, I think, of the 10 Strands contribution to try to be that glue and grease for the project.
And to make this a little more concrete, someone asked, you know, K-12 is a huge range and possibly beyond the scope of the groups surrounding this opportunity. Do you have any ideas for how each of our groups might fill gaps through our LOIs? It would be tragic if all of us focused on a specific grade level area and didn't build sufficiently for another age range.
Yeah, we will definitely look for that. We will definitely look as interest is coming in and there's focus. I mean, like I say, sometimes we might get just one group is able to do it all, and so that's one thing. But you know, if we have multiple groups for whom some specialize in this and some specialize in that, we are, the reviewers are going to have to map that to look at what landscape gets painted and what gaps might be present that we would know that would need to be filled. Yeah.
Great. And other people had questions about different parts of that collaboration. So I'm going to give you two. One is, can you get, and also Celeste, who is showing the slides, there's a collaboration slide that we're getting a request to show on the screen.
I think it's the one, Celeste, with the colored boxes. I think it's that one. Is that right for whomever wants it? Yeah.
Tasha
Okay.
says thank you. Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So here's a couple of related questions. Can you give us, and just to know if we don't get to your question in this, we will get those answers to those questions out to you. I think we're going to be able to get to them now. So can you give us some idea of how many developers or groups of folks you might imagine selecting and what sort of range budget there might be for each developer? So that's one. Actually, I'm just going to give you that one.
Give me that one, yeah, because I can only hold so much in my brain. There could be a minimum of 3, you know, people who can write curriculum, people who specialize in professional learning, and people who are thoughtful about assessment within the context of a unit, right? Formative assessment. So that I would say again, we could get that all from one group, but I would say those are like the 3 bits. So curriculum development, professional learning, and assessment. So, and then in terms of the unit cost, and this is based on some recent experience of being on the board of a open education publishing company, per unit, to cover the bits in the blue square there, we're thinking about $215,000. So a total project size of about 3 million, just shy of 3 million.
And can you go into more details? I love this question. Can you go into more details about the equity piece? How will experience, deliverables, et cetera, be measured versus a more long-standing, larger, more long-standing, especially for organizations that have been doing more hyper-local work, but could nonetheless benefit from this opportunity?
Say the first bit again, Amy.
Yeah. I think they're asking, so it's about the equity piece and how can the more experienced groups with a long-standing history of this and larger deliverables be balanced with groups that have done hyper-local work, but that would be a great fit for the project.
Yeah, so that's the matchmaking that we're hoping to do. Yeah, and we're trying to be deliberate about that. And when I was showing that slide where we're like, there could be a developer consortium, or you could be this, or you could only specialize in elementary versus. So we're trying to provide in our review between Asset 10 Strands and some folks on the advisory board and some folks in the steering committee, that opportunity for the marriage of those bigger enterprises that have done this for decades and people who maybe have a unique contribution to make to this project.
Great. And can teams apply to only conduct field testing of curriculum developed by others, even if they don't develop the curriculum themselves?
I don't think so on that one. I think it would be, the field testing, I think, should be, organizing it, yes, but another party could get involved. But the actual field testing of the units and the data collection and analysis of what comes back, I think, has to be in the hands of the curriculum writers.
And are there already field testers signed up who are interested?
No, not yet.
Can we propose a curriculum for a K2 band rather than writing for 3 grade levels individually? And
yes.
At what level would a grade band curriculum be funded?
So just think of it as $215,000 per unit. So if you were the lead, let's say on the K2, you would be 3 times 215,000.
Great. And how much freedom might a partner have to pursue directions that fit with our pedagogy and design principles?
I am very curious about that. So I don't have a fixed view. There are certain pedagogies that over time I've published myself. And there are pedagogies, for example, built into things like Amplify, and other pedagogies, for example, built, or learning cycles built into things like OpenSciEd, and and PBL as an approach. And so we don't need to make that decision. It's really up to the field and the creativity from the work that you've engaged in the past. We want to see that come through. We don't have a fixed view on what that needs to be right now.
Great. Oh, so many great questions. Let me start maybe with the easier ones. Will developers be responsible for designing and managing online collaboration among educators and students?
No. But if you want to help, yes.
And then with climate, I love this one, with climate change being an overarching topic, have you considered how much emphasis we should put on adaptation and resilience versus mitigation?
Haven't considered the emphasis. We've considered those two parts, but also I'm just going to introduce something else. Also we've been thinking a lot about trauma-informed practices and how to be deliberate about integrating those ideas into this body of work too. Yeah. And
someone asked in the chat.
I'm sorry, Amy, I'm just going to go back. So I guess also, what we've talked about in what we've written up is just this solution orientation to the work, which, could fall in either adaptation or mitigation, but definitely a solution orientation for students. Yeah, go ahead, Amy.
Great. Somebody asked, how would you imagine integrating a developer that has a unique contribution spanning multiple years with the specific unit development teams, like offering models to integrate student action and civics?
I mean, I think that comes through the collaboration. I think that we provide the space for that chemistry to ignite, and I should have picked a different word, and evolve. Yeah.
And then, are you recommending interdisciplinary modules?
I have said interdisciplinary connections, but fundamentally, yes, we're interested in interdisciplinary.
And what are you expecting for a budget on project proposals? Is there a template? How are you envisioning compensating people and projects for the creative ideas and work?
So we would, once we get through this LOI process and we come back to who it is we think we would like to work with, or the parties we think we would like to work with, at that point we'd have a conversation about budget. But just so you know, it would all be within that container of $215,000 per unit, or just shy of 3 million for the total piece. For this total piece in the blue box that we're looking at here on the right hand side of the screen.
And I'm so sorry if I asked this already. I'm at the point of like trying to unread different post-its, and I will give you guys that are here with us a chance to speak up if I have accidentally left yours out. Will developers be responsible for recruiting educators to pilot the curricula, or will 10 Strands manage that?
We will help with that for sure. There's about 50,000 teachers in California that use those EEI materials, for example. We have good and well-established relationships with a number of county offices of ed and school districts, San Mateo, of course, being one of them. So we can definitely help with that. And also, we have good data from the CDE, from the Department of Ed, where we can look at equity data and target specific communities where we would like to most focus this work. So we can definitely help with that. Yeah.
And two more, I think. So is it your intent to address bringing in community-led environmental justice organizations to inform curriculum?
Yes, we'd very much like to see those relationships established. Again, we can help with that. We've done a lot of work. We try to do a lot of work identifying community-based organizations. We usually do it through our relationships with county offices of ed. But yeah, we can definitely help with that. Not so much, I have to admit, not so much on the environmental justice side. I think that's an investment we need to make a further investment in that, but definitely at the level of non-formal providers of environmental education across the state. Yeah.
And do you have a vision for what PD or teacher training would look like once we have the curriculum? Would they continue to receive support over time?
So at a minimum, we were thinking about modules, professional learning modules that would be published at the same time as the student materials and the teacher guides. That's the model that Open SciEd has used, and it's the model that Illustrative Math has used in EL education, and we like that model. But I'm hoping to raise more money either from the state or from private philanthropy, because I would like to engage, for example, networks of professional learning providers in the state, like the California Subject Matter Project or the K-12 Alliance, or the good folks at the Lawrence Hall of Science and other places, to build out that professional learning training for teachers beyond the modules, beyond the off-the-shelf stuff. Yeah.
And then I think, again, the biggest question and sort of idea and ask that people are having is when it comes to connecting organizations to help them collaborate, is 10 Strands able to help connect us? And what I think that you've described how that might happen through the sort of matchmaking process after the LOIs are in, but I kind of get the sense that people might be talking about now or before that.
Oh, I see. That might be tricky, unless it was, I mean, you can write to me, and if you have a gap that you're feeling sensitive about, you're wondering if we know somebody that might help you bridge your gap, I could certainly recommend people from our network that might be helpful. But that's the only way I can think that we might be able to do something like that.
Here's one you're going to love. Would there be a way for partnering organizations to help with the fundraising for scaled implementation in 2023-24?
Yes, I'm just giving you a cell phone number, and you can call me tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. and we can definitely, yes, I think that would be amazing if we could establish that kind of energy, momentum around fundraising. Yeah.
And we're getting the suggestion to put up a slide for connections, like a help wanted board, but for developing the LOI. Absolutely. This Jamboard is here. It's a great starting point for it. And if you want to add your contacts and connections and what you're looking for, that would be a great starting point. And we can think about what else we might do. I think that I have answered them all, but if that is not the case, one other, I think, is just, is it intended that the curriculum be officially adopted by the CDE?
Well, it's supplemental curriculum. And so we would need to explore, the EEI was supplemental curriculum too, the replacement unit curriculum, and it was officially adopted by the State Board of Ed. And so that's certainly something to explore. And through this advisory board, where we intend to have somebody from the State Board of Ed and also the Department of Ed on it. It's less important these days for things to be State Board of Ed approved because of local control in California, but it would still be valuable if it was looked at thoroughly. It could be, could be a component of our evaluation, right? Yeah, we'll definitely look into that.
One last one, will the teacher professional learning all happen online, or is there an opportunity for it to be in person?
I think we'll provide
say in situ, which is great because we want to do place-based learning.
Right. I think definitely the modules will be posted online for people to take and download and use in whatever setting that they want. But those relationships I was talking about, hopefully establishing with our sort of California professional learning partners, like California Subject Matter Project, etc. They've started post-COVID. Well, not that we're post-COVID, but you know what I mean. They've started finally to meet face-to-face again. I've been seeing some photos of good work that they're doing with teachers in the field again. So it would be wonderful, like if we could get to that as well over time.
Great. Since this is EJ focused, have there been California natives at the table thus far, a part of the conversation early on?
Yes, if Celeste wants to go to the slide, Celeste, that shows the steering committee. I think it's, where is it? Is it forward from here or back from here? Keep going. Oh, the other way. Pause there. Okay. So Dina Kileo-Whitaker is a lecturer in American Indian Studies and an expert in traditional ecological knowledge and Indigenous ways of knowing. And many, many thanks to Nan Renner, who's on the call, I can see, for introducing us to Dina. So she's informed already the synopsis that you read. And then also Jose Gonzalez, who's well known in around the country now and maybe even around the world, has been helping us with that thinking. But we're also talking to some people at the Department of Natural Resources. They've got a dedicated personnel focused on this issue, and we're talking to them about joining our advisory board. So yes, we're trying to be very, very deliberate about that.
Okay, last one, we've got to go quick, but it's pretty easy.
Right.
Within the curriculum, will all of the units need to be created under a central theme, or will the units and lessons be separated?
Well, we'd like to aim for coherence, and at the same time, the most relevant experience for the grade bands that the units are being created for. So, I mean, I think that comes out of the thoughtful contributions you're going to make to responding to the LOI. Yeah. So
I think we've got them all. I think.
Okay, wonderful. Let me just say, I think, Amy, you've like missed your calling. I think you are we've never done this before, and you did an amazing job of synthesizing all of those questions and asking me those questions. So thank you for that. I think what we'll do is stop the recording because we are at the end of the session, and